Test.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to call the meeting to order. Good morning. I would like to call the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization Policy Board today, Thursday, May the 6th, to order. We will all stand with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
Big flag.
Got it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. For the three of you that don't know, I am Patricia Page, and I'm the Honorable Chair for the TPO. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being here this morning. A statement regarding virtual meetings was sent out in your meeting package, so we will forgo that, and we will now have the certification, the roll call and certification of quorum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Chet Parsons. I'm the Secretary of the TPO, and I will now do the roll call. We have been meeting virtually for the past year plus, and this is our first chance to get back in person, so we're excited about the opportunity and glad you all are here. So if we tend to make some assumptions based on our virtual meeting process, please forgive me. We're trying to get back in the swing of having in-person meetings. So, Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Here. I like that.
Chesterfield County, Mr. Carroll.
Here.
Mr.
Fine
Holland.
works.
Here.
Mr. Winslow. Goochland County, Mr. Lumpkins. Hanover County, Ms. Pritchard. Henrico County, Mr. Thornton.
Here.
New Kent County, Chair Page.
Here.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Here.
City of Richmond, Ms. Jordan. Here. Mr. Addison. Dr. Newble. GRTC Transit System, Ms. Tim.
Here.
RMTA, Ms. Dean. Secretary of Transportation Designee, Mr. Ribley. And Mr. Mann? Okay. We do have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Under administration, A1 is consideration of amendments to the action meeting agenda. Are there any questions, revisions, changes? If not, the chair will entertain a motion. Motion by Dr. Newville, second by Mr. Williams. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition has the same opportunity. Motion passed. A2 is approval of the April 1st, 2021 TPO Policy Board Action Meeting Minutes.
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Motion by Mr. Williams. Second by Dr. Newville. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carried. At this time, we'll have our open public comment period, the opportunity to speak to the board for 5 minutes. Being no one has signed up, we have no emails or contact, we will close the open public comment period. A4, thank all of you for being here. As you know, we do have a guest coming in today. So the goal of the meeting is to be completed by 10:25 so that we can breathe for 5 minutes and then continue on with Senator Warner and his presentation. And it is good to see everybody face to face. I'd like to thank Mr. Parsons and everyone that set this meeting up today, Ms. Hitter, that set this meeting up today. Thank you for all your hard work. A5 is TPO Secretary's report. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I get into the items on the agenda, I did want to remind the board that we are still streaming this meeting. So it is live on YouTube, and I ask that when you do speak, use your microphone so that everybody following us at home can hear what's being said and the conversation that's being had. Thank you very much. Item 5A, the current work efforts. That is on page 9 in your agenda. We are active in many, many different projects right now, both as work of the TPO as well as supporting the newly created CBTA. And we will have a couple presentations today with some status updates. The first being Connect RVA 2045, our long-range transportation plan. So I will hold that information until the presentation. We are moving forward strongly towards the completion of our update on the 2004 Regional Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. This is a project that is near and dear to many folks' hearts in the region, and the 2004 plan was in dire need of an update. So we are excited about having that completed in the next month or two and rolling that into our long-range transportation plan update. Many of the projects and policies and programs that are identified in the bicycle pedestrian plan are going to be critical for our multimodal regional long-range transportation plan. Our active transportation work group is continuing to meet as great input on not just the bicycle pedestrian plan, but also future implementation of the fall line. We are actively seeking out assistance at all levels on making the fall line a reality as soon as possible, and the commitments that are made by many of you around the table are appreciated, and we look forward to continuing that work with the active transportation work group. We also have a number of other work groups shown on page 11. Our public transportation work group is serving as a critical piece in the development of GRTC's regional public transportation plan as part of their CBTA coordination. And our public transportation work group is serving as a steering committee for that effort, and we look forward to continuing to support GRTC as they develop that plan over the next probably month, 2 months tops. I think the goal is to get that done as soon as possible so that those transit dollars can be put into work. We have established, it's been about a year now, a Vision Zero work group. The City of Richmond has a very active and vibrant Vision Zero program, and taking their lead, the TPO took action, I believe, last June to create a regional Vision Zero work group to assess what the implications are, what the needs are around the region in terms of reducing, improving safety and reducing traffic accidents and deaths. And this Vision Zero work group now has support from VDOT, and a consultant is brought on board to start to develop a regional action plan. So we are excited that effort is kicking off now. The Vision Zero work group meets, I believe, next week, the 13th, to hear the first report from the consultant, and we look forward to working with our partners around the table to make sure that is important and useful for everyone to take back to your jurisdictions. Our RSTP CMAQ subcommittee has been meeting religiously for the past year and recommended a draft guidelines document to the TAC, which would update the process and the program for developing RSTP and CMAQ allocations. So we are looking forward to moving that through the approval process late this spring and early summer, so that the next cycle of RSTP CMAQ in August can follow the new guidelines and better serve the needs of the region. Our work status and financial reports are shown for you were distributed, and they're started on page 12 in the agenda packet. We are on track to expend the funds that we expected to expend. Most of our work tasks, as you can see, are up in the 70 to 75% funds expended. There are a couple items which are lower, and the reason for that I can explain is that we had intentions when the work program was adopted last year to bring on additional staff and provide some more support for these particular programs. We were not able to do that because of COVID implications, and that's the reason why those funds are not being expended. We are able to roll them over and use them in future efforts, and our plans this year as we develop the work program are to now be able to bring on that additional staff support and provide the services that we've committed to do. The last item, 5C, is a brief update on the CVTA. Many of you around the table are intimately involved with that organization as well. I'm not sure what update actually needs to be provided, but we are continuing our efforts to stand up the organization, and we're very close to being to that point where all of the documentation and processes are in place, and we look forward to now finishing development of the regional priorities. If you recall, there were 3 pots of funds that are being brought in as revenues. 35% goes to regional priorities, 50% goes to local distribution for local transportation projects, and then 15% goes directly to GRTC for regional public transportation expenditures. And the final piece of that puzzle is that 35% regional priorities. So over the next few months, we will be developing those priorities through a subcommittee of the CVTA and bringing those back to the full authority for their first review of the process, as well as our first slate of regional priority projects. Madam Chair, that's all I have for the Secretary's report. If anyone has any questions on the budget or anything else, I'd be happy to entertain those.
You've heard the Secretary's report. Are there any comments? Hearing none, we will move on to new business. B1 is Connect RVA 2045 Universe of Projects.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. The presentation, we have 2 monitors here and 2 monitors down. I guess, Chet, you'll be changing the slides. So today I'll be asking you, talking about the universe of projects first and asking for your approval. Just to give a background, the LRTP is a federally required document or planning guide for the Richmond region for the next 20 years. We need to update that every 5 years, and it's due by October of this year. So basically in the LRTP, we had set it out into 6 tasks or phases. The first phase, as you can see in the graphics in the screen, is the transportation needs assessment, which is basically looking at the multimodal transportation issues and needs throughout our region. This was completed and approved by the LRTP Advisory Committee in May of last year. We had 1,000+ issues and needs listed in that list. These issues came from the transportation studies, which was conducted in the last 5 to 7 years, the locality comp plans, as well as advisory committee members' recommendation, as well as the public comments which we received through the interactive mapping platform Wikimaps. So that was approved by the LRTP Advisory Committee on May of last year. After that, this second phase was basically getting a strategic direction or defining the vision, goals, guidelines, and objectives for the plan. We had a long process for that, and finally this board approved the vision, goals, and objectives for the long-range transportation plan in February. The third phase, which I'll be asking for approval today, is the planning phase, in which we deduct the issues into transportation projects, reasonably significant transportation projects, and I'll discuss that later. So once that is done, that's been approved, we score and evaluate those projects, and develop a cost-constrained, fiscally constrained, long-range transportation plan or list of projects, which will come back again for this board for its approval. After that, we need to do the whole evaluation of the plan, and after that, the final adoption would be in October of this year. Next slide, please. So the action requested today is that I'm asking the board that the board approves the 2045 long-range transportation plan's universe of projects and authorizes staff to begin the testing process to score, rank, and prioritize the universe of projects into a refined cost-constrained project list. Next slide, please. So what is the universe of projects? It's basically a streamlined list of all reasonably significant multimodal transportation projects in the Richmond region. So to follow our process, the universe of projects has to address an issue from the LRTP regional transportation issues needs list as approved by the LRTPAC. So only those issues which had a logical transportation project solution are included. So we had many policy related issues as well, which we are not addressing now. It has to be inside the RRTPO MPA boundary. We know that we have approved to consider the whole region into the MPA boundary, but that has not been official yet, so we are basically using the previous boundary. It has to qualify as a regional transportation project based on the LRTP Advisory Committee's approved LRTP project inclusion guidelines. So basically, we looked at the federal code and made our own interpretation and had a long discussion with the LRTP Advisory Committee to come up with what is a reasonably significant project. And that we decided that. So a project has to be qualified under that criteria to be listed in this universe of projects. So the projects are basically based on local and regional transportation plans and studies, obviously including the local comprehensive plan or the metropolitan, the local transportation plan. And also some of the projects were proposed by the project champions, the localities as well as RRTPO. If you had an issue for the future and we haven't developed any project, we also have developed some solutions for those projects which are included in the universe of projects. Finally, we need a political will to proceed with this project. We don't want any controversial projects in the list. So political will to proceed with these projects is important. Next slide, please. So for highways, altogether in the map, we can see that all the black lines are the highway projects, hard to see. We have 184 projects. Projects can be divided into 11 types, basically auxiliary lane, which is the widening from exit to exit interstates, interchange modification, intersection improvements, new interchange, new overpass, new road, new underpass, road extension, realignment, relocation, and obviously widening, which is the bulk of the projects. So in long-range transportation plan for highways, we can see two different types of projects overall. One is are projects which have been extensively studied and came out from one of the studies or plans we have developed which are ready for implementation. So they have very much detail for those projects. And then since we are looking for the plan for 2045, we also have projects in the conceptual level. Like, let's say we want new interchange in Varina Road in I-295. That hasn't been studied, but there might be a need in 2045. So those kind of projects are also included there. Altogether, the highway needs, and this is just the reasonably significant projects. There are a lot of other important projects which are considered local programmatic project, which is not accounted here for. Only those are more than $5 billion. Next slide, please. We have another categories for the bridges. So basically it's bridge rehabilitation and replacement projects. These bridges have to be structurally deficient and also has to be in the national highway system to be qualified. So 15 bridges qualified under that criteria. One bridge, the RMTA Westover Hill Boulevard Bridge, the Nickel Bridge, it's not a structurally deficient bridge as per now, but the bridge was built in 1925 and by 2045 definitely it's going to be structurally deficient again. So that bridge was also included with the 15 Bridge with capacity constraint, it's not listed in this list, it's listed in the highway list. These are only bridges which are needed for replacement and rehabilitation because of their structural deficiency. So total bridge needs are $229 million. Next slide. The third is the transit projects, and we have 11 transit projects, 5 BRT routes which came from the DRPT-led transit vision plan for the Richmond region, and a follow-up which was done by RRTPO. We are calling it Vision Plan Phase 2. 5 enhanced service routes which came from that study, and 1 transit study which came from the GRTC list. These costs in the transit is our only capital cost, which includes the net purchase of the new buses, sidewalks throughout the corridor, crosswalks, intersection improvements, as well as any transportation system priority software and hardware which is required to run BRT. Operational cost is not included. So transit needs altogether $693 million. Next slide, please. Then we go to the active transportation projects. We have 34 projects listed in the active transportation category. All unfunded segments of the Fall Line Trail within RRTPO boundary, 24 segments. Fall Line Trail spurs, Virginia Capital Trail spurs, and some other major connectors and multi-jurisdictional trails are also included in the active transportation project list. Total needs $214 million. Next slide, please. Park and ride projects, we have 14 new park and ride projects which basically came out from the regional park and ride studies, as well as some of the STAR studies which VDOT did. 14 new and 1 expansion relocation project. These new park and rides would add at least 2,600 new parking spaces in our region. The total park and ride needs is $64 million. Next slide, please. And then finally we come with rail. We have 9 projects, 3 projects from Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative by DRPT, which is basically enhancement related to capacity change and grade suppression, etc. 3 Staples Mill station replacement and enhancement projects, 3 projects over 3 phases, and then 3 industrial access projects which are likely to be funded by private funding. Altogether, the rail needs is $1.3 billion. Next slide, please. So overall, this is the summary. We have 268 projects altogether. Highway is 66% of the total needs, followed by rail, and then transit, and then bridge. So total needs is $7.69 billion. That's 2020 dollars. So when we start scoring and ranking these projects, we only look after the latest SIP year. So that would be from 2027. So again, we have to add inflation to these because these are 2020 dollars. So that would again make it. We haven't calculated, but it will cross 8 billion for sure. Plus, we have 3 I-95 interchange modification suggestions which came out from the I-95 studies, which we don't have any cost yet. So those needs to be added as well. Next slide, please. So once we had the universal projects, we went through a public comment period. The original public comment period was from March 8th to March 23rd, a 15-day period. Due to the request from the public as well as the LRTP Advisory Committee members' recommendation, the public outreach period, the public comment period was extended to another 3 weeks period from March 25th to April 15th. So altogether, we had a lot of comments, tremendous participation by the public. We had a couple of different platforms. The main platform was the online interactive map, wiki mapping, in which the public could zoom in his or her computer and provide any comments to the project he or she is interested in. So we received altogether almost 900 comments from Wikimaps, and then we also received comments from direct email, and then the blog post in the Connect RBA website, we also received comments there. So altogether, 999 comments in total. just one short of 1,000 comments. So Wikimap, it's hard to, because a single person can comment multiple times, and we wanted to know how many unique individuals had commented. So one way to look at that is to look at the IP address, and it doesn't capture if a same person is using different devices. But based on that calculation, I think we had 325 unique users in Wikimaps, as well as 100 other users through emails and direct Connect RVA website comments. So altogether, 425 unique people did comment in this process. Next slide, please. So we worked with the project champions, the localities, and based on their guidance, we addressed the public comments which we received during this period. So the next step, which is the final leg of the LRTP process from May to October, once this board approves the universe of projects, we start scoring and evaluation of the project, and we develop a staff recommendation for that, and we'll review with the project champions and the advisory committee members to come with a constraint plan which is agreed by all. Once that has been agreed upon, it'll come to the policy board for approval, and we'll have a public review period before that as well. The next phase after that, once that is done, is the constraint plan evaluation. The first thing is the air quality conformity assessment. Once the list of projects has been approved by the by this board, then we have to start a public review period for the conformity process. And once that is done, we'll come back again to this policy board for the approval of the conformity list. Once that is done, VDOT will submit that to Federal Highway, and the Federal Conformity Determination we get that by 45 days. So that will be before the plan is adopted. Similarly, we need to do environmental justice analysis, the accessibility analysis, which is basically comparing the no-built and the built to see what was the benefit we received from implementing all these transportation projects in the plan. And then the performance measures of the plan as well. Economic impact analysis to be determined based on if we have enough time or not. And then the final plan adoption is by October 7th, October board meeting. Next slide, please. And again, I'm asking for action. The Connect RVA 2045 Advisory Committee recommendation, they reviewed the universe of projects and approved it as presented by staff. Staff recommendation, staff also recommends approval of the universe of projects as presented. So resolved that the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization Policy Board approves the universe of projects for the Connect RVA 2045 Long Range Transportation Plan, and authorize staff to begin the testing process to score, rank, and prioritize the universe of projects into a refined cost-constrained project list. I'll be happy to answer any questions now.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Williams?
this is a question for Ms. Parsons. Powhatan County will probably very quickly be coming with recommended changes to projects that affect that jurisdiction, which would probably result in a fewer number of projects that need to be scored, so that should be a positive for this group, less work. So I have no problem with going forward with the universal projects as long as staff understands that in the very near future you're going to be getting a request for changes to the existing projects as they exist in Powhatan right now.
That should not be an issue. The universe of projects is considered to be all of the possible projects to be included in the long-range plan. So as long as we are removing and not adding,
Yes, sir.
then that should be not a problem at all.
I didn't think it would be, but I just wanted to make that clear in making the motion to move forward with approval of the universal projects, that are going to be under consideration for scoring.
Yes, sir.
And I would think that because this is long range, that this is a document that will be from time to time amended or revisions made on it. So for clarity, are there any other questions or comments? It's not on, sir.
We don't hear you over here.
Hold up. There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. So it seems to me that this is a speak now or forever hold your peace moment on the universe of projects, and that hopefully all of our folks on this body, and as well as our staff members, have supplied us with all of the possible projects that you could even think about to throw on this list. And I don't see any staff members raising their hand saying they forgot one. So, and I've checked with Chesterfield, Madam Chair, I would move to approve this list.
I'll second that motion, Madam Chair.
Thank you. It's been moved and second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposition has the same opportunity. Motion carried. Ma'am?
Is it working now? Yes, excellent. I just wanted to add some clarification. You indicated that the Boulevard Bridge is structurally deficient, and that's a little bit of a misnomer.
No, it's not structurally deficient now. So the general condition rating, it's a technical term. The bridge has 3 components, and if any of the 3 components is below 5, then it's considered structurally deficient. So the Boulevard Bridge now has 2 components which are 5. So it's likely that that project would be structurally deficient in the future. And it's an important bridge, and it was built in 1925, and I think it was rehabilitated in the 1990s and hasn't done anything after that. So we are looking at 2045. So that's why, based on city's request, we are adding that bridge as well.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thanks.
Mr. Hodges? No, sir.
No. No.
In the interest of time, you can hear me. Maybe it's the loudness. Anyway, if there had been discussion, I was going to comment that I had some specific concerns which I intend to ask my TAC representative, and in the interest of time, not get into the details. But the universe of projects, that title brings some concern because there are projects that weren't included. The process is excellent. The maps you were able to read online and blow up, but there are projects that may have merit, and I'm thinking of the implications for the Central Virginia Transportation Authority and their setting of regional priorities. So I just wanted to make a comment, and I appreciate the commission's or the committee's patience. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So it's basically the universe of project, and we should have added reasonably significant universe of project rather than all other projects. So there are other important projects as well, which is not in the list, which are considered local programmatic project. So if we have time, we'll make a list of those projects as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. On D2, we have the FY 21-24 TIP amendment from GRTC request.
I don't think we voted.
I'm sorry?
I don't think we voted. We did? Okay.
We did. We did.
All right.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is the first of 3 sets of TIP amendments that I have for you today. Next slide. So this is submitted by GRTC, as mentioned by the chair. GRTC submitted 18 requests back at the end of February, early March. Of those, the majority were existing projects, which we were able to process administratively. However, there are 3 new projects which are being considered for addition to the TIP. So just as a reminder of the process, for every TIP amendment, we're required to demonstrate conformity, basically ensuring that we're not increasing air pollution. We have to demonstrate constraint, meaning that this is financially feasible, that it's within the funding that's allocated and the obligation authority of the region. And then there's a public review process, and then TAC and the TPO have to act on the item. Next slide, please. So the 3 projects, the first is GRTC 065. This project would allow GRTC to purchase 3 articulated buses per year for the Pulse, for a total of 6 buses. Essentially, this is increasing capacity without doing anything else other than changing out the buses. So this would be exempt for air quality purposes, as it is a minor expansion of the fleet. And you can see the planned obligations are in FY23 and FY24. The funding is primarily FTA 5307, which is dedicated transit funding, and then state and local matches. Next slide, please. The second project is for consultant services. So this is a more general project to allow support for various studies that GRTC is undertaking, including asset management platform, BRTC, the transfer center. There's a lot going on. This is also exempt from air quality perspective, as it's a technical or planning studies that doesn't lead to any construction directly. And then the planned obligations are primarily in FY22 with a little bit at the tail end of this fiscal year, FY21. And again, it's 5307 with state and local matching. And next slide. The final project is GRTC 068. This is a project to modify the existing Pulse stations to accommodate those larger articulated buses. So essentially, since you have a longer bus, you need to change the platform a little bit to allow those to accommodate the bus. Again, from air quality side, this is exempt. It's reconstruction or renovation of an existing structure. So the planned obligations are in FY22. Again, it's 5307 and state and local funding. But this is to allow the platforms to be in place and then the bus purchases. So those are the 3 projects that we have from GRTC. As I mentioned, the next step is to go to TAC. Next slide, please. So we took this to TAC in April. TAC unanimously recommended approval of the 3 projects. After it went to TAC, we went through the public review. Next slide. So the public review period per our engagement plan is 15 days. During those 15 days, we sent out a notice to all our interested parties and all our committee members via email. There was a web page posted with the draft amendments for people to review and to submit comments. We only received 1 comment on these proposed projects, and basically the comment was that this is a good project if essentially the cost of buying the buses and improving the stations offsets the cost of hiring additional drivers for the regular buses that would be needed to accommodate the same capacity. So that was the only comment we received. Next slide.
Excuse me.
Yes.
So you heard that comment, so what's your reply to it?
So we responded to the commenter, but essentially we agree it is a good project, it does increase the capacity, but we didn't respond directly in terms of the cost effectiveness on that side. The policy for engagement plan is that we share all the comments with the policy board, so you all can consider it as part of your consideration of the amendment.
Thank you.
So the action requested today is that the policy board amend the FY21 to FY24 TIP to add these 3 projects, and that the projects are considered exempt from conformity based on those exemptions that we noted. With that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions you have.
See if this will work. Press it again.
He's working on
Hello?
it.
Sound check?
Press it again.
Maybe? Now? No? One more time?
Maybe if you shout it.
Hello? It's trying. Okay, great. Thank you so much for this presentation. I had a couple of questions. One, I would like the answer to the question from the 1 comment. I'm a little bit concerned that we only received 1 comment on something that's a pretty substantive change for Broad Street. And for those of you in the room who have been in Richmond down to Broad Street, it has gone through a lot over the last several years, starting with the creation of the Pulse. So I am a little bit concerned about another construction project on Broad Street, especially right now. I'm wondering, 1, can you answer the question about the cost, if it's worth it? 2, what does this elongated platform look like? How long is the construction period? And then, if we were going through this, are we going to be strategic about the implementation of it along with the repainting of the Pulse lane? Thank you.
Sure, and I will happily defer to GRTC to answer some of the details in terms of the cost and the design timeline.
If I, oh, there we go. It's, if you shout at it, it works, right? Okay. So let me see if I can get through all the different questions. So the first one is, what is the cost effectiveness of this? When I first got here about 18 months ago, the Pulse was running at and frequently over capacity on our 40-foot buses. The options available to us would be to buy additional 40-foot buses and hire additional operators and put more frequency on, which would incur additional capital and operating costs year over year, versus start looking at putting in articulated buses, which are 60-foot buses, so that we could operate more or less at the same cost, but increase our capacity on those buses with the longer buses. The cost of those buses is higher, however, the cost of the operators is not. So the operational costs is more or less net neutral. There's a slightly higher cost of operating a larger bus. So pretty much going from the 40-foot buses to the 60-foot buses is not a significant or it's a negligible cost change. Regarding the construction itself, the Pulse, when it was originally designed, was supposed to be designed for 60-foot buses. This was before my time, so I'm speaking about what I have been told is that during the construction process, value engineering brought the walls on either side. If you're familiar with the Pulse, there's some walls that edge the platform, that those were put in a little bit closer, and the concrete pad underneath where the bus sits was also pulled in, so they fit a 40-foot bus, but they don't fit a 60-foot bus just quite. So we need to pull those out. The entire station itself wouldn't be reconstructed. It's pulling the concrete a little bit larger on either side and pulling those walls out a little bit on either side, so that those buses, which have 3 doors instead of 2, can all be boarded and alighted at the platform. So it's a relatively minor adjustment to each of those stations. We would certainly look to do this in coordination with any other construction project along Broad. We would look to do it with, in coordination with where the painted lanes would be. We don't want to dig anything up twice. That would be counterproductive. I believe I answered all the questions, but maybe I missed one. Oh, thank you.
Mr. Holland?
Yeah, I thought one of the questions was the time span for the construction. That was our last question that I didn't hear a response to.
Thank you, thank you. I knew I missed something. The time frame for the construction, the part of the process is to do the study itself. I don't believe that it would take very long. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we're looking at a relatively short construction. It's, I don't want to guess, but there's 26 stations, and they would each be done, I would not think they would be done concurrently, but consecutively to minimize disruption to the passengers along the entire corridor. So we would come back with a specific schedule for that construction, which I do not have at this time.
Not a problem. With that, Madam Chair, I move approval of this item, GRTC request.
We have a motion by Mr. Holland. Do we have a second?
Am I allowed to second my own? I would second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposition has the same opportunity. Motion carried, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next slide, please. So the next item I have for you is a TIP amendment for request submitted by DRPT. This is for the 5310 projects. As the board may recall, a few months back you were asked to endorse submission of applications for 5310 funding. This is the outcome of that process. The projects that are going to receive funding need to be included in the TIP as well. The vast majority were already in the TIP, but we do have 2 new projects which would be added. So we have to go through the same process as we went through on the last slide. Next slide, please. So the first project is for the Community Brain Injury Services. This would allow the purchase of a 14-passenger wheelchair accessible bus. Again, for air quality purposes, it's exempt under the minor fleet expansion or replacement vehicle category. The obligations are all FY22, and this is a unique year. This is all going to be federally funded. So generally this requires a local match, but because of the stimulus funding, this will be 100% federally funded this year. Next slide, please. The second project is for Heart Havens, and this will allow the purchase of 9-passenger vans. with lifts. And again, this is exempt for the same category, a replacement of existing vehicles or minor expansion of the fleet for air quality purposes. And the obligations are all planned in FY22. Again, 100% federally funded. Next slide, please. So TAC reviewed these at the April meeting as well and unanimously recommended approval. Next slide. The 15-day public comment period, was held concurrently with the last set of amendments, and we did not receive any specific comments on these projects. Next slide. The requested action today is the same as the previous motion to amend the FY21 to FY24 TIP, adding these two new projects, and to note that they are exempt for air quality purposes. Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Madam Chair, I move for approval.
It was moved by Mr. Williams, second by Mr. Winslow. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposition has the same opportunity. Motion carried, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is the final tip request that I have for you today. This was submitted by VDOT. So in general, the requests that we've seen are for specific projects. This one is a little bit different. So in the tip, we have individual projects that are regionally significant, so we want to track them on an individual basis. And then projects that are less regionally significant in terms of air quality or something that the MPO isn't funding directly, we can group them all together. So it's a pot of money that funds a lot of different types of projects. So this is a request to amend the table for the bridge rehab replacement and reconstruction project grouping. Essentially, there are 4 bridges that have funding through the State of Good Repair program, which are going to be moved out of maintenance to construction so they can start the rehabilitation project. They're actually all right here in the city, so it's 1st Street, 4th Street, 7th Street, and Broad Street over I-95. So adding those projects to this grouping significantly increases the amount of money that's in that pot, and it adds a new funding source, which is the surface transportation funding. So we wanted to bring it to the policy board so you had a chance to be aware of this and to take action on it. Next slide, please. So again, this was reviewed by the Technical Advisory Committee, and they unanimously recommended approval at their April meeting. Next slide. And it underwent the 15-day comment period. We received no comments on the project grouping. Next slide. So the action we're requesting today is to revise the TIP, revising the project grouping summary table. So there's no specific project with it. It's just revising the summary table of funding that's available to that group. And since all the projects that are already in there are exempt for air quality purposes, that's not specifically included in the resolution. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Are there any questions, any comments? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, Madam Chair.
Motion by Mr. Williams. Second by Mr. Carroll. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposition? Motion carried. Thank you. B5 is the draft FY22 Unified Plan Working Program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, this is an information item. I wanted you to be aware that the Technical Advisory Committee next Tuesday will consider the draft Unified Planning Work Program for fiscal year 22. So that will be the time period July 1, 2021 to June 30th, 2022. We have brainstormed about this a little bit in past months, and there are no diversions from those discussions at this point. I would look forward to receiving comments back and feedback from the TAC next week, but we will plan to have this on the agenda for your review and approval at your June meeting.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we will have item C, agency and committee reports, starting with VDOT.
Hello, there we go. All right, in the interest of time, I'll also try and be brief this morning. Just a quick summary from the April CTB meeting. There were a number of workshop presentations that will likely be of interest, and certainly they are available on the links provided. There were discussions about the I-95 potential use of variable speed limits, transportation's commitment to environmental stewardship, Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program, along with the ITTF
innovation and technology transportation funding programs, along with discussions about the draft 6-year plan progress over this past spring. The next CTB meeting is expected in a couple of weeks later in May. 18th and 19th are the dates that are currently on the schedule right now. We would anticipate that it stays in a virtual format, but we'll certainly keep TPO staff updated as we see any changes to that format as we move forward. We'd certainly like to thank everyone that participated in the public hearing earlier this week for the spring 6-year plan meeting in Richmond District. We had over 60 participants online. We had 8 speakers, and we're very grateful for the folks that were able to listen and join in and provide their comments. There certainly is an opportunity to continue to provide comments in that process. Comments are able to be shared through May 17th. And certainly if anybody was not able to attend or speak in person, there still is that opportunity to provide additional comments if necessary. We do expect that the CTB will take action on the 6-year plan at their June meeting so that it is all done and approved prior to July 1. We have posted a willingness, for a public hearing on the intent to abandon a frontage road in a portion of Henrico County. That willingness is posted out there, and we're certainly open to any comments that we may receive. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments, Mr. Riblett? I do have a comment, sir. I don't know if other localities are experiencing this or not, but I do know that I have received several emails, and in our localities, when our local VDOT station is contacted about road repairs or issues or concerns, and they are being told that to contact the county because we have money through Central Virginia Transportation Authority. That is indeed a message that as a locality and other localities, we do not want to go out, because VDOT maintained roads are still VDOT maintained roads. And that is not the purpose of the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. So I'm asking that a strong message be sent up so that it can be sent down, that that is not the instruction and direction that should be given to the localities.
Ma'am, we appreciate you sharing that comment, and we certainly want to partner with you to make sure that we're sharing a unified and common message that way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we will have a report from DRPT.
Good morning. I'm also going to be brief. Yesterday was another big day for transforming rail in Virginia, with the governor announcing that we've reached an agreement with Norfolk Southern to expand rail passenger service and improve rail reliability to Southwest Virginia, which is now known as the Western Rail Initiative. That will increase frequency with Amtrak to Roanoke and enable an extension to the New River Valley in Christiansburg. Not specific to here in Richmond, but I know that this group has been very interested in what we're doing on the rail front. On a similar note, on April 8th, the governor did announce that we've hired DJ Stadler to be the executive director of the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority. So that agency is now getting stood up with its own staff. They've also hired a CFO and a chief operating officer. We're working with Chet and team at the TPO to have them come back and give you an update on where we are with that Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative. DRPT does retain the authority for statewide rail planning. We are starting an update to our FRA mandated plan. We will be coordinating closely with the MPO, so our planning staff from DRPT will also be reaching out to the TPO and working with the public as that plan gets rolling later this year. And the last thing that I'll mention is our fiscal year 22 6-year improvement program was released. As staff has mentioned previously, we were able to fund our 5310 requests, a number of them at 100%. On the transit side, this was a very significant year for transit capital. We had over $200 million in requests for transit capital statewide. That's a level that we are not funded at and we don't see very often, but very pleased that with our focus on state of good repair, we were able to support a number of requests in the region, including 30 replacement buses for GRTC and 19 replacement vans. We've also been able to increase statewide transit operating assistance by 2%. So we are continuing to work with the transit agencies to fulfill those capital needs, and are going to be looking at trying to spread those requests that weren't funded this year out over the next 5 years. That concludes my report, and there's more detail in the printed version. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments? We thank both of you for your reports. As we move on to other business, are there any interests in future meeting topics? Okay, we have several that are listed. So, and that would be for our June 3rd meeting on Title V Plan Update, our Vision Zero Work Group, the process update, our draft regional public transportation plan with GRTC, our RSTP CMAC program guideline update, and that's a tentative, and then FY22 Unified Work Plan Planning Work Program, and then the election of our FY22 TPO officers. And then we have our resiliency on July the 1st, and then we have several other meeting topics listed. Again, want to thank all of you for your due diligence and our time this morning. Our next meeting will be on June the 3rd, 2021. Hopefully we can meet again in person. And with that said, if there are no other comments, thoughts, we move for adjournment of our meeting. Thank you.
5-minute recess. Get together in 5 minutes.
Okay. We'll get back together in about 5 minutes.
you want me to take back as we kind of wrestle through the next process, through this next piece of legislation. But I'm going to start though with it has been a wild time in D.C. I actually think that when history looks back on what the federal government did over the last 14 months, where we put literally $5 trillion into the economy, we could all potentially take parts of that and say, I wish the government hadn't done a little more here or a little less here. There are certain places where, from my fiscal standpoint, I think we could have cut back a little bit. But I think history will generally judge that this was extraordinarily well needed, and that we managed to keep an economy running that otherwise could have gone completely off the cliff. And I think some of the small business programs, again, have been unprecedented, the PPP program. I know one of the things I think about Central Virginia and Richmond in particular, how great the restaurant scene has become. Many restaurants are still struggling. We did just open up a new program. Today's Thursday, right? On Monday, $29 billion for restaurants. That money is going quick, so if you've got restaurants in your district that have not applied, please tell them to apply. We also have some separate funds that are still in the process of getting out on what's called shuttered venues. I feel for the restaurants, but the folks who've been really creamed are those people who are theaters, music venues, others where, we just not been able to congregate. There are dollars out there for those kind of issues as well. For local government and the Commonwealth, you're welcome. This last plan, $4 billion to the Commonwealth of Virginia with virtually no strings attached. $3 billion to local governments in Virginia, and one of the things we made clear in this last March bill, that it would go, the previous legislation only sent money without touching the state to our largest jurisdiction, Fairfax. That was not fair. My phone burned up from some of you around the table, don't make it all go through the state, get it straight to us directly. So we got it down to both the city level, the county level, and in certain counties, actually to the town level. The center of the universe, Ashland, I think gets some money directly. So I would also tell you to use that money well, because I don't think there's another round coming. And while we're going to talk about transportation, one of the things that I am passionate about, and I am urging every time I talk to a local government, many of you know my background before I was governor I was in the telecom business. And one of the things that I think COVID demonstrated extraordinarily clearly was that high-speed internet connectivity, broadband, in 2021 is an economic necessity, not a nice to have. And I love it. Applause lines, even when I'm giving my spiel. But here is the kind of nitty gritty that I want you guys to take home. I am going to get to the infrastructure plan. I am going to get to some of the other things in the money, and I do want to listen about what you need. But on broadband, in the December bill, we put out $7 billion. In the March bill, we put out $17 billion. We've put $24 billion into broadband in the last 3 months. None of that money has touched you yet. I got $10 billion, I've got a lot of pushback. I got $10 billion set aside through a new Treasury program that will go for broadband. That will translate to $220 million for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And the reason why I set up a new program was, and again, I don't want to nerd out on this, but a lot of the old programs on broadband, well-intentioned, but they don't provide additional coverage. If because as you probably again well know and hear from your constituents, we've got a really screwy process in broadband where the incumbent provider will say, oh, we cover 80% of New Kent. And and you live in New Kent, and you go, they don't cover my house. And I live part-time in King George. They don't cover my house. So we put up this separate money, $220 million for Virginia, that will go through the state, but that will go directly for expansion of broadband coverage without any strings. Point number one. Point number two, of the money that you're receiving, the $3 billion that are going to local communities in Virginia, it's being broken into two tranches. One tranche you're going to get hopefully this month. The second tranche you're going to get in 2022. The 2022 money you can use for broadband infrastructure. What I've been talking to the governor about, and hopefully we'll have an announcement shortly, I'm meeting with his team again tomorrow, is because the Commonwealth's got so much excess money right now, we thought when we were putting this money forward for state and local government, Commonwealth was going to have, the projection was $1.3 billion shortfall. We got a surplus. So the $4 billion that have come into Virginia right now at the Commonwealth level, you ought to put your wish list together, and we ought to make sure that we think about long-term investments. What I'm urging is that if New Kent wants to take some of its second round of local money and commit to a broadband plan this month or this summer, the state ought to be able to advance against that 2022 money so that you can get in the queue now to get your broadband built out. And one of the things we're going to try to provide is, what are all the various options? The options that you have, and again, you guys are, I'm sure, probably aware of this, but the options on broadband delivery today are so much different than they were even a year ago. We're starting to see some of the rural electric co-ops provide that service straight to the home. I mean, Louisa County, and kudos to Louisa, $15 million they put up before any of this federal money come around. They're going to get 97% coverage. My desire is to come up with a plan that will give you at your local level a complete series of options, and my hope would be that we could get every Virginia jurisdiction to have a broadband delivery plan signed up before Labor Day. And the reason I mention this is because while some of you say, well, Mark, we hear in Biden's plan there's more money for broadband. There is. I don't know how much of that money's going to get actually allocated, but what I fear is, let's assume we get an infrastructure plan passed out by the end of the summer. There may be such a glut of resources coming in that communities that don't have a plan already in place could be pushed back a couple years. So more to come on this, but I beg you, if you've got a working group at the county level, at the city level, to look at broadband, and I know broadband is both coverage and affordability, we will come with both. And please, again, not to nerd out, but the speeds need to be higher than the 25/3, the 25 up and 3 megahertz down. There are going to be better options out there. And again, I want us to come out with a how-to plan for every jurisdiction. So my commercial on broadband. In the March bill as well, there was, and let me make sure I got all my stats here. There was $30 million for transit, and I know you've got some questions about expansion of transit. There was $18.5 million for the airport. And then, as I mentioned, you've got this bigger chunk of $4 billion and $3 billion, respectively, for the Commonwealth and for local communities. Going forward, what can you all expect? We obviously have the needs. American Society of Civil Engineers have indicated we've got 577 bridges in Virginia that are basically derelict. I don't know how many of those fall in Central Virginia. We got 2,100 miles of roads that are in, F condition or worse. So clearly there is a need. So what we've got now is the president has put forward a proposal at 2.65 trillion. Some of that, we can argue whether it is classic infrastructure or not. I think the classic infrastructure, road, rail, bridges, water, broadband, that's probably going to be easier to get than some of the human capital broadband, but we can talk about that. The president's put forward 2.65 trillion. My Republican colleagues in the Senate have put up 565 billion, so a big gap, but, and again, not to kind of go too nerdy, but if you guys are on this panel, you're nerds to start with. These numbers are you'd say 565, 2.65. The president's proposal on kind of apples to apples on hard infrastructure is more like a little over $1 trillion on hard infrastructure. But even there, you're seeing some of the funkiest Washington numbers because, for example, my Republican friends have said it's 565 billion, but what they don't tell you is they bake in the baseline numbers that are already expected, so the actual new money is only about 125, which I don't think is enough if we're thinking about this as a historic one-time effort. On the other hand, the Democrats are also cooking the books a little bit. This is equal opportunity, you know, because they put forward an 8-year spend program with a 15-year pay for. That's a long way of saying, you know, it is still going to be too early to tell whether we can get to yes. I'm part of every bipartisan gang there is up there, so there's 10 Democrats, 10 Republicans. We're working, but we're going to have to, you know, we are planning next week on getting in a room and let's make sure we're at least comparing apples to apples. And I do think on the, you know, more traditional infrastructure, I'm still relatively optimistic that we can get to a bipartisan deal, and I think that infrastructure component can be potentially bifurcated from the other things, and you know, we may be able to get that passed on a again, a bipartisan basis. We can also get into the pay-fors if you'd like, but I think I've talked too much at this point already, and I love being in here, but it is noisy all the time. You know, this room sometimes brings back challenging memories because as some of the folks around the room, you know, that are Democrats, the Democrats have their big dinner here each year, and it is the most challenging place ever. The good news is nobody listens to any of these speakers anyway, but it is a challenging place sometimes to hold big dinners. So again, kudos to you guys for the great work you've done. Kudos to you all for coming together as a regional authority. Thank goodness you've got a little bit of revenue streams coming into you, and you know, modeled after what we've done in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads. But I want to turn the floor over to you guys so that I imagine you've got some wishes on your list. And the last point, I promise. You've probably read in the news or seen on the television that there's a big debate that earmarks are coming back. In the Senate, and earmarks being, you know, can an individual member choose certain projects? In the Senate, there's been discussion, but I have no clarity yet on whether they're going to be really back. If they are back, you know, and if I have no problem if they are back to kind of make requests, but you know, it will be, because it'll only be for nonprofits. I think it can be for governmental entities, can't be for private companies, and they need to be disclosed. And my sense is they're going to be, you know, quite small. I had some folks in another part of Virginia come forward with a individual $765 million earmark requests, and I said, I don't know what you guys are smoking, but that is, there's going to be nothing like that. So just, I don't want you to get your expectations up in terms of what may come out of that process. But with that as my opening comments, love to hear from you and happy to try to answer any specific questions you've got on next steps on the process. And again, kudos to all of you for working so well together. Just stay on. And also, I'll come back anytime if I can get those standing ovation, introduction stuff. I love that as governor, but
Senator, I represent Powhatan County, and first, thank you for your service, to the Commonwealth. We much appreciate what you do on our behalf. But you are right on target when you started talking about the importance of broadband. Ms. Page and you can, and I'm sure Hanover, I'm sure Charles City, Goochland, all of us are struggling with that issue. Particularly today with, whether it be for education, whether it's for business, and all of us are witnessing a paradigm change because nobody goes to meetings anymore and travels on the road. They're doing Zoom. Education, we've had to change the way we do education. So again, I would encourage you to keep pushing for broadband, for the localities, particularly for your rural jurisdictions where it is a huge issue for us. But again, thank you for your efforts.
Well, and my appeal to you is that with the $220 million coming from the Commonwealth, and the governor, I don't want to get in front of him, the governor has been talking about making other funds out of his $4 billion pot. And I don't know what number Powhatan's got, but up to 50% of that can be used for broadband. What I'm trying to encourage you all to do is not wait until, I'm going to wait and see what comes out of the infrastructure plan on broadband. I think if we get another set of dollars on broadband, there's nothing that says we can't then substitute those fall dollars, but getting your plan in place now, and one of the things I think we owe an obligation, and this is, again, my background used to be in this field, so I'm really, probably too much in the weeds, but this is an economic necessity. Your county cannot compete if you don't, it doesn't guarantee you success, but it will guarantee you failure if you don't have high-speed internet connections that hit at least 95% of your residents. So what I'm hoping we can do is, with the governor's office and others, come with kind of a series of options, because at a county level, I'm sure you got all kinds of folks knocking on your door saying we want to help provide you, but you got to figure out, what's the right option, what's the right proposal. I'm very, and I hope I'm not, well, if I am making some folks a little upset, so be it, but I think we got to really push the incumbents, because the incumbents, the big guys, they want to claim they're giving you coverage, but they're not. And unless we put, I'm a business guy, unless we put competitive pressure on them. And so I am a big advocate of what the rural electric co-ops are doing. I'm a big advocate on some of these other proposals. What I hope we can do is, if you don't have a provider of choice in Powhatan, can we come forward with, all right, here's how you help finance it. Here's how, here are a variety of options that you can look at. But I strongly would hope that every jurisdiction would have a plan in place by the end of the summer. But thank you for your comment.
Dr. Nubia. Senator, thank you for, I think we have to scream or in a sound eventually. Thank you for your service. Just in terms of the $220 million that's coming to Virginia, do you have any sense of, is there a formulaic allocation that will occur? Any sense of that? And I certainly hear by Labor Day to have something in place. And then with the earmarks, do you have a sense of when you might know about that, if there'll be an application process, any of that?
Great questions. On the $220 million that's coming to the Commonwealth, That's an estimate. This plan is so new. I'm working with the Treasury on a daily basis to make sure they try to get the regs out. They have not even put any texture to that yet. And that raises a bigger issue, which is, I know the legislators are saying, hey, Warner, you know, we got no idea even, you know, how all of this money is going to flow. So we're trying to get the money out as quickly as possible, but many of these are new programs. Because the truth is, so you know, I don't have the answer yet on the 220. I am pushing them. As soon as I have it, you'll have it, number one. Number two, you've probably got an estimated number that the city of Richmond is going to get X out of the local government bucket. I think whatever that X is actually lower than what you will actually get, not to kind of make everybody say, you know, this may be the last Uncle Sam presents, so spend them well, because there are a dozen other initiatives that were in the March plan, and some of it's back to the December plan, like on food assistance, on rental assistance. You know, obviously there's a couple $1 billion for Virginia K-12 schools in this plan that are already been appropriated. And there are many of these other initiatives, like the rental assistance program before December across the whole country was a few $100 million. We put, and numbers may be wrong, but they're from memory, like $15 billion in December and $25 billion in March. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of dollars coming, and I am very aware that this is great, but until you have specificity, it's hard for you to do a budget or hard for you to allocate. And the only thing I can tell you, something, is I promise that as soon as I get it, you'll get it. And on the earmark issue, I think it's going to probably remain, you know, I'm going to participate in whatever we can appropriately, but I don't want anyone here to think, oh gosh, you know, I can get the Tim or Mark or Bobby or, you know, Donald or something, and this is going to be the, you know, this is going to be the long-awaited money that's going to solve the whole problem. I think it's going to be relatively small in that pot. Right?
So the one to thank you for us today. I just wanted to say that, and you alluded to a new entity that we have called the CVTA.
Can you know, being like an old guy now, can you speak up a little more, because I'm having a hard
Can I
time.
get a little help with the mic?
No, they got to turn it on. They haven't turned his mic on.
This mic, yeah.
Try this one. This one working?
Testing. Okay, it's working now. Yeah. So, Senator, what I'm saying is thank you for being here with us. And we have a new entity, and you referred to it earlier, and you probably know that as the CVTA. This is what I want to share with you, is that we have reached a point in the Richmond region that we've gotten rather collegial, and we're working together more harmoniously than we've done in the past. And this gives us a brand new opportunity to grow. And when we think about transportation, there'll be future needs. And what I would like for you to do, and some of your colleagues in Washington, is we need to have a visionary approach now for what I call the new transportation thrust that we're going to need. We're going to have the cars coming in, autonomous vehicles, all these things. But what I would like to see is more visionary legislation from Washington to help localities like we are. And we are part of 9 localities that came to the table and put something on the table. And I commend each of them. So I'm just sharing with you where we used to be, where we are, and where we would like to go. And that's just simply asking you, let's see, can we have a little bit more visionary thrust when it comes to funding transportation for the future?
Yes, sir.
And I think we need that.
Well, let me respond to that. One, I believe there ought to be a preference in priority for regionally backed programs. I mean, we've all been talking, gosh, you know, since I've been doing this stuff, we've all been talking about the need for more regionalism. You guys are doing it. You ought to get rewarded for that, number one. Number two, one of the things I should have mentioned, I've had a bill, bipartisan, my partner is Senator Roy Blunt from Missouri, and I got Lindsey Graham on it, and John Cornyn, and Amy Klobuchar. I got a bunch of, you know, broadly bipartisan, to say that one of the things that we need to bring to the table in this plan, and it may be a way for us to bridge where the president is and where my Republican friends are, is we need to bring to the United States an national infrastructure bank, which would allow us to finance some of these projects. Now, we're not calling it, because of the sausage making, you know, an infrastructure bank. We're calling it an infrastructure financing authority, and the story behind that would require a couple glasses of wine. But it is the idea: can we go out with these record low interest rates and borrow, you know, 40-year money at you know, about 2%? I mean, we've got our proposal is called the Repair Act. For an initial $10 billion appropriation, we can get $300 billion of projects. I can take you through the math, but suffice it to say, it becomes, you know, this is not free money. You got to get it. They got to get paid back. You know, so oftentimes infrastructure financing authorities, and we've done a lot of it. One of the reasons I've been such an advocate, Virginia has been a leader in PPP projects, public-private partnership projects, for years. And I think if we've learned one experience from that, you know, this is not a silver bullet. Some of those projects have made a lot of sense for the taxpayer. Some of them have not. We had a project here in the Richmond area that didn't make, you know, didn't come out as well as we'd hoped. But by having a national infrastructure financing authority, we can bring, you know, one, the expertise of financing to the table. Two, we can have because sometimes local jurisdictions or regional, even at the state level, we may not have the expertise to go toe-to-toe against Wall Street. But having this expertise, having this ability to do, whether it be, you know, energy infrastructure, road infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, I think it's the kind of creative approach that we've not used in the past. Now, for those of you who are kind of transportation nerds, this is like TIFIA on steroids. But it is another tool, and I think it's going to be a tool that will help us bridge the gap. If, you know, President's here and my Republican friends are here, you add the infrastructure financing authority, that's a way to, both sides look like they're getting to a higher number, and they are getting to a higher number, but it's just a different tool. And, you know, and specifically, and I don't know whether you guys have, what your feelings on this, I do think we're moving towards electric vehicles. The only way we're going to electric vehicles if we have charging stations. You know, the president's put in $170 billion around electric vehicles. Well, it would make no sense at all for us to simply write a check as the federal government and build those and own those. No, we ought to partner with a private sector entity, and we can help finance them, but they're going to have some level of rate of return because there's going to be some charge for using those. So I do think we've got a creative approach here that is called the Repair Act, and you will also have, at least from me, a preference for regional priority projects over individual jurisdiction projects.
We know that ARP is imminent. Was wondering if you had any sense of in terms of date when we would receive greater specificity in terms of the guidelines and possible allocation date. Any more information in that regard?
I like the fact that you're like, when are we gonna get the money? Stop talking about it. When am I gonna get the money? And again, something once I know, you will know. And I'm on Treasury on a a lot of this stuff is flowing through Treasury, and because everything that's coming to the local government, or the 95 cents on the dollar that's coming to the city will come through Treasury. Maybe it's only 90 cents because there are a bunch of other initiatives that will come through other parts of the government. The thing is, and again, we can agree or disagree, and one of the things I think it is important to point out, while the last bill was a partisan bill, the previous, $3.2 trillion was all bipartisan. And frankly, a lot of my Republican senator friends are out back in their home state claiming credit for this last batch, even though they didn't. So it's all fine. So I think there is bipartisan, but there is the numbers are so large compared to how these programs, which are mostly tiny beforehand, and I think there is rightful concern. We want to make sure there's appropriate oversight, and we make sure that this gets out in a smart way with smart guidance. But I know this is a huge tension of you as elected official, and I'm sure you, the citizens of the city of Richmond, are saying, we're hearing about this, and maybe I got my check. When's the city going to do X, Y, and Z if there's all this promise of money? I hear your priority. I'm sure it's shared by all your colleagues as well. I'll keep the pressure on.
Thank you.
Others? Please.
Following up on Mr. Thornton's comment about being visionary, and speaking of electric vehicles, electric trains, new concept in Virginia. If you go in other parts of the world, they have high-speed rail, and it is something that is a problem now. If you're traveling from New York, you have to spend, and you're in D.C., you have to spend about 45 minutes waiting for the engine to be changed because you're entering Virginia, where fossil fuel is the only thing used, and our rail system is set up there. Obviously, in the town, we have an interest in the creation of potentially an alternative high-speed rail line. And I think Maryland is doing a lot of work in that area. That would be truly visionary. I don't think you can continue adding lanes on 95 and tracks on CSX. You need a corridor for true high-speed rail. And maybe we'll catch up with Japan, China, Europe, and other countries that have already done it.
Let me, one, I agree. Two,
I timed this.
your timing was perfect. You got it in, buddy. Two, one of the keys of increasing, whether it's conventional rail traffic from Union Station to Richmond and beyond, whether it's conventional or high speed, was the requirement for us to get another bridge over the Potomac.
Yes.
And, the governor's announced, I think, a $3.7 billion high-speed rail corridor, and, kudos to him, and Transportation Secretary were down. We couldn't have even started that until we got approval to get another bridge. And I'm happy to report we did get that. It's called the Long Bridge Project. We got that in the December bill. So the hurdle of not another passageway, the ball, I think, is now back in the Commonwealth's court on how we put more flesh on that plan of getting that high-speed rail. I'm all for it, because you cannot asphalt your way out of this problem.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay. Again, thanking you for being here. However, when we talk about broadband expansion, we talk about the issues facing the rural jurisdictions. However, one thing that I have discovered are there are issues also in the larger jurisdiction, and that issue is affordability of service to all. That's a major concern. And the other concern, even more important, is when you apply for the current grants that are available, then the guidelines of the grants are being written by some of the big guys in that industry. So how do you win? Because you have to then go through an established provider in order to get the award of a grant.
Amen. Oh, this is, you know, it makes me crazy because it's like, and the established provider says, well, we don't really need to do this because we got a map showing you're covered, which is baloney. That's why this next $220 million that's coming to the Commonwealth does not have to go through any of those established programs, number one. Number two, the money that is coming to New Kent, if you choose as a board to say, you know, we got X amount of money, half of it can be used for broadband. And again, you can do what you want and deal with whomever you please to make that deal on coverage. Three, one of the things that has not, I think again, it goes to the point of, Warner, you talk about this, when are we going to get the money? Of the $14 billion that got put in December and March in the traditional programs, a lot of the affordability program is something called Lifeline. Have you heard of it? There is a lot of additional funding in that. So what I'm hoping that the state can do, and I don't want to overpromise because we're...
Yeah, I'm writing it down.
But what I'm hoping is that we can come forward kind of with a menu and say, okay, if the issue is coverage, here are the options. If the issue is affordability, here are the options. But I am going to encourage the state to also say, okay, we want to get this done, but you got a slug of money here too. You got to put in some as well. Mm-hmm. But I can't stress enough that this money that is coming down to the localities out of the March bill, I don't think you will see that kind of money in a single or two slugs, since there's two tranches, coming again anytime soon. So, you know, using that well, and again, you don't need to hear from me, but using it on things like broadband so that you're not creating additional operating expenses because, you know, God willing, we're not going to see another upsurge in COVID. So the idea that there's going to be another COVID relief plan, I'm hopeful that there's never going to be another COVID relief plan because we're past COVID. Mm-hmm. But we got to come to you with a how-to, because I think there have been times when people come to local jurisdiction in Virginia with razzle-dazzle ideas about broadband, and they don't frankly deliver. And some of this even goes back to, you know, in my old industry on wireless, because, you know, there is a challenge on wireless that can you get high enough speeds? Mm-hmm. And there's a new plan, actually, you heard of this guy, Elon Musk, who's, you know, makes us $1 gazillion. Mm-hmm. You know, he's got a satellite delivery, and there are a couple of other satellite deliveries, but we're going to hopefully come and say, okay, here are the variety of options. One of the things that I'm encouraged by, and there's a group, the group that Louise is using, you know, sometimes the rural electric co-ops, because they already have a wire to your home, their ability to get that fiber to the home is almost cheaper than anybody else. So I'm not pitching one group over another, but we got to make sure you all know your options.
And then, sir, my other comment, and it will be new to you, but they hear it in this group all the time from me, and that is traveling from North Carolina, you can tell when you see the sign that says, "Welcome to Virginia" by the highways. It is with much vision that we now have a new authority that's working. However, even with that authority, we indeed need more funding. It was with joy that we saw the $30 million for highways, and then when you saw how it would divvy it up, it will not get I-64 through New Kent County widened to 3 lanes. And by the time we get it widened to 3 lanes with the amount of traffic that that is on that stretch of 23 miles, we will need 4 lanes. It is an evacuation plan coming up from Outer Banks through Hampton to get out of there in case of evacuation. And it will work until you get to the end of James City County, and then no one will be able to get through New Kent. And that's just one of the priorities that we have in this region. But the infrastructure, highway infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, water and sewer, all of those are intricate parts, and I don't have to tell you, to the economic development of all of our 9 regions.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I can, when I was trying to get hired as governor back in 2001, one of my promises was, wouldn't it be great if we could finish 64 in our lifetime? And the truth is, 20 years later, I still remember when our transportation commissioner came in and had to tell me one of the exits they'd done in, I think, Newport News, they'd done the design wrong and they had to go back and mess it all up. But this is why, again, I think I've seen the material I got from you guys was you've got 3 major priorities. One of them widening a 64. One of them is this new 94-mile trail. Is that right? And and as somebody who was very proud when I was governor to start the Capitol Trail, I think that has economic development, tourism, and I think as people are starting to travel differently, not saying everybody's going to do a bicycle, but I think it's a great idea. And what was there were 3 that I got. What was what am I forgetting? Or there were more than 3, but I got my list that there were 3 that were the biggies.
Fall Line Trail, is it the Fall Line Trail you're referring to from Ashland to Petersburg? That's a project that we have embraced regionally.
You have not yet.
I have embraced it regionally.
Oh, you have? Okay, good.
Through the CVTAs, wonderful authority. Frank is chair of that. My colleague, Mr. Carroll, is vice chair. But that's another project I want to mention for you. And certainly thank you for your leadership as governor, and certainly in the Senate. And especially thank you for your efforts in a bipartisan way to work together with your colleagues there in the Senate. So thank you for your leadership, and we appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And and one of the reasons people say, there's nothing that makes a bipartisan plan, just inherently better. But the one thing we've seen over the last few years, if only one team passes it, you can't count on it being as law, because when the other side comes in, all they want to do is unravel. So for years we had the efforts to unravel Obamacare or unravel the Dodd-Frank. Democrats are in, they're trying to unravel the 2017 tax cuts. So I'm committed to go the extra mile because and again, this is no great reveal to you guys. Maybe boards of supervisors get it right the first time. Congress never fully gets it right. And you look back historically, even in the most popular programs like Social Security and Medicare, they made an effort, then you have to come back and fix it. And if you don't have both teams invested in the program, you don't have both teams invested in fixing it. And that, I think, is, if there's one lesson I've learned up there, it's this, one team only solution set. Not a way to run a railroad or a country.
In the middle of our budget right now, and I have an amendment to freeze fleet purchases with the hope that we can green our fleet, either, very excited to hear about the Infrastructure Financing Authority or through other funds. So I just want to say thank you for that. But then also, we are in the shadow of 95, and there's been a project identified in our master plan to reconnect historic Jackson Ward. That's one of our most historic black neighborhoods. 95 cut through it. We would like to see a land bridge to re-knit that neighborhood. Do you think equity projects like that are something that we could go after?
I don't know, But, if the region supported, I would be supportive. For example, we have a project up in Northern Virginia. We got Amazon coming in. We're trying to do a land bridge between what was called Crystal City. Now we've rebranded it as National Landing, a land bridge over the parkway to the airport. So, other countries have been more successful on this, but the idea that I would strongly favor the idea of these land bridges to connect communities. And again, I don't know all the particulars, and I'd want to look at the particulars, but that conceptual basis goes kind of to Frank's point. We got to be thinking not with a 20th century head on, and if we get anything, even if we get anything close to what Biden's talking about, this is going to be a once in a generation increase in funding. So, picking those projects with some vision, I think, is going to be really important. Looks like I'm driving the audience out. People keep trickling out, so I don't want to take. Again, I'm happy to answer as many questions as y'all like, but I don't want to intrude upon your time if you've got other business. Well, thank one again. Let me end with where I started with. Congratulations, y'all, that this entity has come together. Again, I remember when I was like one of the new guys in politics. Now I'm like the senior guy, which still makes my head spin a little bit. But this could not have happened, obviously, 20 years ago. I'm not sure it could have happened 10 years ago. But as I think we think about our economies, when they were attracting employers and quality jobs, they're not going to look at jurisdiction versus jurisdiction. They're going to look at a region. And I think, if anything, COVID is even going to make that probably even more distribution of where the jobs are and where people live. So congratulations to you all for coming together. For identifying at least, the beginning of revenue sources. I think at 0.7% on some of that comes in. I absolutely hear, Chair Newell, don't just talk about it. Give us when we can make these decisions. I get it. I'm with you. I think it will be. They're getting pressure from everybody to get these things done. I think you will see that in the next couple of weeks. I also think, and I know you're in budget season, and I know we got to get the, and many states don't have, off-year elections like we do. We got to have the General Assembly come in and bless whatever we're going to do with the $4 billion too. So, but I also want to leave you with that hope that we will be back to you shortly on these broadband ideas. I'd like nothing more than to say that by Labor Day, every Virginia locality had a plan to get within 2 years, 95% of the people covered at an affordable, with assistance for affordability. In terms of the only thing I'd ask of you is pray for rationality in D.C., which is sometimes in short supply. But I commend all of you, and again, I think those of you who've been at the front line of local government over the last 14 months, God bless you, because I can only imagine how hard it is. The only thing that's probably got harder is if you're a school board member, because then you can be guaranteed to have made everybody mad, at least half of everybody mad. But kudos, thank you, and next time I will bring the specifics and bring the checks. Thank you all. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir. So again, we want to take the opportunity just to thank you for your time and your visit, and I am more than positive that you will receive future invitations from us. Thank you.